22nd, and yesterday I started the Joy Luck Club by Amy Tan. This is my TBR Spin pick for May. It took me a little while to start this one. I wasn't super excited to get into it, but I am now 111 pages in and I am really enjoying it. If you don't know what TBR Spin is, it is a super fun booktube game that you can use to read down your TBR throughout the year. At the beginning of the year, we picked 12 books, and then our two hosts who invented this game, The Book Bully and Freshly Read Books, spin a wheel every month. The wheel has prompts on it, and those prompts lead us to pick a book from our stack. You can pick 12 books and start at the beginning of the prompts. Just go back and watch their videos. The videos alternate between the two channels. If you want to start for the May book, which is what I'm reading now, pick 7 books and then watch the prompt for May. If you want to start in June, you can wait until the end of this video. I vlog all my TBR Spin books, and at the end of each vlog, I pick my book for the next month. So at the end of this vlog, we're going to watch Jill or Sarah's video and pick our next book. So you can pick 6 books and then watch that with me and get your June book. In May, I picked the Joy Luck Club, and I was super glad that I got this because it's the Asian Readathon. It's Asian and Pacific Islander Heritage Month in May, so I was happy to get a Asian American author. This book was written in the 1980s, and this is a debut novel, which I had no idea when I first started it, but I was reading about Amy Tan a little bit, and this really blew her up as an author. This was a super famous book. I think this was one of the first books in America, at least, that dealt with Asian Americans and Asian immigrants and took place in Chinatown. It was certainly not the first book that was ever written about that, but it was definitely a book that came into the public eye and got a lot of renown. The Joy Luck Club follows 8 women. 4 women, the mothers, who came over from China one way or another, who are first generation Chinese immigrants, and then their daughters, who are first generation Chinese Americans, and they are all friends. They have this club called the Joy Luck Club, which is a time when they get together, they play mahjong, they gossip, they eat food, they make food, and it's just a time for the families to kind of get together. You know, when the children were young, the children were involved, and now that the children are older, it's really just the mothers. The dads are around as well, but we're learning the mother's perspective. We're learning what brought them to America. We're learning their relationships with their daughters, and then we're also seeing from the daughters' perspectives as well. So there's multiple parts to this book, and each part is broken up into 4 sections, and then each section follows a mother or a daughter. I'm on the second part, and it's following some daughters and some mothers. It's not necessarily a linear story the way I thought it would be. I thought that this was going to be intergenerational epic tale of family. So I thought we were going to start in the past, or maybe flash back to the past and learn in a linear manner how these people met, what happened, like how they had their kids, how they came to America, all that stuff. But that's definitely not what we're doing. We're really jumping around. So the first section of the first part is one of the daughters, and she's talking about her mother, how her mother recently passed away, and her mother was the inventor and the creator of the Joy Luck Club. So now it's falling on her shoulders to uphold this tradition, what that means for her, what that means for the tradition, what her aunties, the people in the Joy Luck Club, expect from her, and whether she's ready to take that on or not. And then we see maybe a snippet of a mother's life in China and how that worked. Maybe we see how a mother and daughter are at odds with each other and how the mother, from the mother's perspective, feels guilty about that or upset about that. And then we meet one of the daughters who is a chess genius and how that affects her life as she grows. So from her early childhood, following her story, and then how that affects her mother and her relationship with her mother. So it's really interesting so far. It's definitely not what I was expecting, and I'm pleasantly surprised by it. I do struggle with books that are so convoluted with so many people. I don't usually like intergenerational things, but I like the way this book is structured, and there is also a character map in the beginning, which I've been referring to like nonstop. It's not that difficult to tell the the mothers and the daughters apart because the mothers have traditional Chinese names and the daughters have mostly more American names, although they are often referred to by their Chinese name or by Chinese nicknames like Mei Mei, little sister. Definitely struggle with multiple perspectives usually. I definitely struggle with intergenerational tales. I definitely struggle with those long sweeping epics, but because this is broken up the way that it is, I'm not finding it difficult. And I think so far each woman's story is totally different than the previous story, and they're all really interesting, and I am compelled to keep reading more of them. Now, I've only gotten to the second part, so I haven't had a repeat of any of the women's stories. I haven't come back to anyone to see if their story is going to move on linearly from where we left off, or if they're just going to start again with another story about their life. I could potentially find that confusing depending on what happens, but so far I'm really enjoying it. Let me know if you're participating in TBR Spin. Let me know what your book for May was and how it's going. And when I read some more, I'll let you know. It is June 2nd, and yesterday I finished the Joy Luck Club, so I didn't really update you on this. Sorry about that, but I did really like it. I will say that it is not the kind of book that I normally read. It is about 4 mothers and 4 daughters and their relationships. The 4 mothers are Chinese and came over as immigrants from China under various circumstances, and through individual chapters following these mothers, we find out more about their lives and more about how they came to be in America and how they came to have American Chinese daughters. So then we also get the daughters' perspectives. It was really hard for me to keep track of who was who. I could not keep track of them on my own. I had to use the character map for this every single chapter to figure out which person was which and what stories went with which woman. Now, I don't think that's a fault of the book. I think that's my fault. I don't really love multiple perspective stories. I don't love multi-generational stories. I don't love mother-daughter stories. So, a lot was stacked up against me in this book. Again, I enjoyed this book a lot. I definitely really liked it. I teared up at the very last page. It was really heartwarming and emotional. The culmination of learning about all these women was definitely embodied in the final scenes. I'd be super interested to read more from Amy Tan. My friend told me that her other books follow mothers and daughters as well, but like one set of mother and daughter, so much less confusing. The whole time that I was reading this, I definitely thought that this felt like a collection of interconnected short stories or like a serialized book, but I was like, oh, that can't be true. But then I read under the copyright page about how these stories had appeared in various publications at different times. So I think that Amy Tan actually did write this, or at least did publish it in part as a serialized book and then maybe filled it out. That's not to say that it felt incomplete or felt rushed or felt like it wasn't a whole story that was supposed to go together. I think it definitely did, but just the way that each chapter and each story was very much contained and by itself made it feel that it was serialized, and it was. I definitely see why this is a American modern classic, and I think that this was one of the first books that ever highlighted the immigrant experience to the very, very mainstream. Not long after this book came out, the movie was made of it, and I remember it being, on the bestseller list, and I remember seeing it in bookstores even when I was a child in the 80s and 90s. It's held up. I think people definitely still read it. There were aspects of it that felt in the time that it is, so taking place in the 80s, taking place in that time period with when it was written, but it is also very timeless. Like, these experiences could be from today. Obviously, there are things that date it, like wars and invasions in China and different things like that, but like, it could be now. Like, these stories could be now. And certainly the experiences of the mothers and daughters and their relationships and the idea of stressful relationships that mothers and daughters have, the expectations that mothers and daughters have of each other. Especially, I think, the expectations that very traditional mothers put on their daughters, and then how their daughters either feel guilt for not adhering to that or possibly feel rebellion against that is very common and could be of any time, anywhere. I didn't love that during the mother's chapters they spoke in kind of broken English. I think that it was meant to distinguish their voices from the daughters in some respects, but it was odd that they were telling their story in English. Like, you would kind of think that they would be telling their story in Chinese, in whatever Chinese dialect they spoke, but it would be kind of translated for you, the reader. So hearing them kind of speak in broken English in their chapters was a little disconcerting and felt a little, I don't know, unnecessary, I guess. Amy Tan grew up in America and she only went to China after she wrote this book. So is that just her experience with the older Chinese women that she knew? And so that's how she hears their voices, and that's why she portrayed it that way. Possibly. I don't know. I definitely think this is a worthwhile book. This edition is only like 285 pages. Super easy to get through. It definitely put me in a little bit of a reading slump in that while I was reading it, I enjoyed it. I liked hearing their stories. I loved hearing about China. I'm discovering this year that I really like books written about China and Chinese history. But it was one of those books that when I put it down, I wasn't super eager to pick it back up. I also had a very weird reading month this month where I read a ton of books in the beginning of the month and then only 2 books at the end of the month. And one of the reasons that I only finished 2 in the last 11 days of the month was because I was reading this. I could have finished this on the last day of May, but I didn't want to rush it. I didn't want to feel pressured to get it done. I ended up finishing on June 1st. It's not that different. But now we have to watch Sarah from Freshly Read's video and find out what our next TBR Spin pick is. So let's move to the computer. The books that I have left on my TBR Spin list are Ruby Fruit Jungle by Rita Mae Brown, In Love and Trouble by Alice Walker, The Bean Trees by Barbara Kingsolver, Mr. Wilson's Cabinet of Wonders by Lawrence Welcher, The Secrets of Nim by Robert C. O'Brien, Severance by Ling Ma, As You Wish by Carrie Elwes, Florida by Lauren Groff. So Florida actually is one that I already got on a Florida is actually one that I already got on a TBR Spin, and I do plan on doing a video of it. The month that I got it, I read another short story collection, so I didn't want to do 2 short story collections. But this is definitely one that I will try to read this summer because I think it's a summery read, but also I need a new short story collection. Let's cue up Sarah's video and see what the spin says for June. June already. Wow.
It's that time.
Ooh, okay, a book swap. Okay, so it says to swap out the oldest published book on your stack for your newest published book that you own. So that's a little tricky. What do I think is the oldest? So like the 70s and 80s. This I'm guessing is like the 80s. I think it's got to be one of these. Well, let me just check Cabinet of Wonders because that could be like a weird... Once we figure out what this is and we swap it out, we're going to spin again. This book was 1995. Oh, older than I thought. 1982. 1973. That's our oldest so far. I thought that one was written in the 80s. Alice Walker in Love and Trouble is a collection of short stories, and it starts in 1967, so I think that this one actually might be the one. I don't think we're going to find one older than that. Nope, yeah. So Alice Walker in Love and Trouble is the oldest one on my stack. I'm sort of sad that this one's coming off because I do love Alice Walker, but I've definitely recently heard some controversial things about her, and so maybe I need a little distance from her before I read more of her books, so maybe it's not the worst thing. So I'm going to put this back on my short story pile. As you might know, I don't buy new books, but I did recently buy a new book that came out this year because it is by one of my booktube friends, and that is The Lakeside Cemetery by Jessica Hawes. This one came out in March, I believe. Oh, it just says 2023, but I'm pretty sure that this one came out in March, so that one's really new. This was February 2023, so that one's really new. Oh, 2023, okay. Let me just see when The Adventures of Amina al-Sarafi came out. February 28th. Oh, February 28th. Oh my god, they're all February 28th. Shut up. Well, I think I should put this one on the TBR Spin because this is the one that I'm least likely to get to in under any other circumstances. I'm super interested to read The Spite House by Johnny Compton. This is a haunted house horror, and I'm super excited to read The Lakeside Cemetery. So these I will definitely get to probably this summer, but The Adventures of Amina al-Sarafi is not one that I would necessarily pick up under my own volition. So we're gonna put this one in the spin, and let's go back to the video and see what our second spin is. The second spin landed on a book with at least 5 words in the title. So that takes out The Secret of Nim, that leaves in The Cabinet of Wonders, takes out The Bean Trees, definitely takes out Severance, could leave in As You Wish, and could leave in The Adventures of Amina al-Sarafi. Just on impulse, my first impulse, Mr. Wilson's Cabinet of Wonders. I've had this book for a long time. I don't even remember where I got it. It just looks really cool. It's a non-fiction, and it's quite short, actually. It's under 200 pages. It says, pronged ants, horned humans, mice on toast, and other marvels of Jurassic technology. And I think this is kind of about the idea of curio cabinets in the Museum of Jurassic Technology. So this sounds like actually it's kind of a memoir as well as a nonfiction about curiosity. So this is going to be our June pick. Let me know if you're playing a TBR Spin. Let me know how your May read went. Let me know what book you got for June, and I'll see you in the next one. Thanks so much. Bye.